We're going to be over in Matthew chapter 7. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have a judgment-free zone? Man, wouldn't that be nice? And wouldn't it be great if it could just go with us wherever we go, right? I mean, if we could just have that judgment-free zone, I mean, it would be awesome to be able to have that either we're not being judged, or on the other side, that judgment-free zone means we're not judging other people either. No, there's a time and a place for judging. It's not usually where we think it is. It's okay to judge one another, and we are supposed to be equipping each other and helping one another. And sometimes that means exposing to a brother or sister in Christ whatever it is that needs to be talked about and discussed. The thing that we sometimes don't have is the relationship from which we can have those conversations. And that makes it difficult. Sometimes we as the church, we are viewed as a very judgmental place. Now on the one side, it's because we hold to a moral standard that is not held by everybody else. We are held to an ethical standard that not everybody holds to. And that we are very exclusionary in saying that it's Jesus Christ, He's the only Son of God, and He's the only way to forgiveness and eternal life. And so sometimes we are seen as being judgmental in those ways. Well, if you want to judge me on those things, fine. But sometimes we also become very judgy about things that aren't as critically important. And that's where we tend to get into some trouble. But we'd love to have a judgment-free zone. I think we'd all love that. So I want to begin today with a scenario, and then we're going to talk about that for a minute, and we're going to see then how Jesus would interpret that, how Jesus would express what we should be doing out of the first 6 verses in Matthew chapter 7. And I think we'll all be challenged by it, and maybe we will unearth a few things within us that we need to work with God and let God work with us on in the process of our time together. So, let's open with this scenario. So, you've got a coworker that comes in late regularly. They work with you. They work alongside you. And when he doesn't show up, you have to do his job for him. Is any of this familiar yet? Is anybody already recognizing something in this process? We've all been there, right? We've had those moments. Well, he goes out and he goes partying overnight and has all kinds of other escapades that he's involved in that are just difficult and problematic. And so he comes in hungover and drunk, and he comes up and goes, hey, he's ready for work now. You know, he's a couple hours late. He goes, hey, thanks for covering for me. I really appreciate you doing that again. Now we're clicking, right? We've all got that one person. How would you handle that situation? You know, there's dozens of ways you could handle it. Probably several ways you have handled that. Let me give you 3 ways that you could handle that situation. A, you could just look at that person and say, you know what, I'm done. That's it. This is over. I'm done. You go out, you do all these things overnight, and you come in late. I'm having to cover for you. That's not my job. It's your job. I'm absolutely done with this. This is sick and twisted and disgusting, and I hate that you're doing that. And if it were up to me, you'd be fired already. I'm not going to ask how many of us have done that. That's one way we can handle it, right? Maybe that's the way you've seen it handled. Maybe it's the way you have handled it. That's a way. Another way to handle it would be to just have this discussion with this individual and say, you know what, I'm really uncomfortable covering for you in these ways. I'm really concerned about you. I'm worried about you. that you're going to get in trouble at work, and I'm also worried that you might get in trouble in your personal life as well, and I'm kind of concerned about that. I have no problem covering for you in real emergencies. But in these kinds of moments, I really wish that you would not ask me to cover for you anymore. Do you understand where I'm coming from in this way? Does that make sense? Can we talk about that? Now, that's another way that you could handle that. In the heat of the moment, that's not always the one that rises to our mind. The other way to handle it, a third way to handle it, would be to say, hey, no problem at all, man. Hey, we're friends. That's what we do. We just help one another out. And hey, I hope you'll give me some of those details of what all you did last night, because it looks like you had a pretty good time. Hey, whatever you need, I'm here for you. It's no problem. No problem at all. So that's another way to handle it. And sometimes that may be a way that we choose to try to lessen the tension. So I want you to think about that. Which one of those ways is more accurate for you? Think about that. Maybe write down 1, 2, or 3 on your bulletin there on the sermon notes. And just write which one of those, it may not be exactly you, but which one do you gravitate to more than the others? I just want you to write that number down in your bulletin, just so you can keep track of that and just be thinking through that as we walk through our time together. Because I want us to evaluate a little bit about each of those things, because each one of those is the scenario in which we live sometimes, right? I mean, we're there. The first one is a very self-righteous kind of thing. And it's really hateful sounding. I mean, it's not only sounds hateful, it looks hateful in the way that your face probably crinkles up when you're saying those kinds of statements. And it's not that you were just mad, but you got personal with it. You were attacking that individual, and that's a real harmful, hateful way to go about responding in those situations. And look, we've all been there. We've all made those kinds of things, maybe not those exact words, but we've done that. We've been not at our best on some days, and we react in that way sometimes. It happens. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it happens. It's something that we need to go to the Lord for and confess before Him and seek His help and strength and how maybe we should be responding in that way. But we can get that way, and it's just this self-righteous because you pat yourself on the back in the process while you tear somebody else down. That's one way that you would judge that situation. The second way is more righteous discernment. The second way is more saying, I want us to have a conversation about this. You're clear about your position on it, but you're not attacking that individual. And so you're trying to keep a dialogue open to say, hey, do you understand where I'm coming from? Can we have this conversation about this? And again, that's another way to judge that situation. And the third way that I shared as an example is a way that maybe in some terms, in some spaces, you would almost call enabling that individual. Because it's the way that we, in our culture today, kind of view love, isn't it? Well, I want to love them, so I'm just going to ignore the behavior that is going on. Because, I don't want to ruffle feathers. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to have to deal with the fallout. I'm scared they're volatile and they may go off on me, and I don't want to deal with that. So I'm just going to kind of minimize it. I'm going to try to reduce everything. What's happening is you are in effect saying what they're doing is okay. Now, in that scenario, regardless if you agree with what they're doing overnight, the fact that they are causing you at your job to have to cover for them and lie to your boss about the situation is a problem for you and for them. And to just ignore that, minimize that, set that aside, and act like no, it's no big deal is not a helpful way to deal with this situation either. But that is also another way to judge the situation. Judging. Well, it's complicated, isn't it? It's filled with all kinds of meaning. A lot of times, if you hear the word judging, what do you think positive or negative? You think negative. Stop judging me. Is that positive or negative? It's negative. And yet, whether you are in the court system and the judge renders a verdict, or you're in the classroom and the teacher has rendered a verdict on your paper, it could be good, it could be bad. But when we hear judgment, we always think bad, don't we? We always think bad. It's not always bad. When we stand before the Almighty Judge of the universe, there will be good and bad. There will be those who have placed their faith in Jesus, and that judgment's going to be beautiful. And there are those who have not placed their faith in Jesus, and that judgment will not be nice. Because you have heaven and you have hell. There is good and there is bad. A judgment will happen in the eternity. But when Jesus brings this up in the Sermon on the Mount, he is looking more at how we interact with each other and how we deal with one another. And so let's look in Matthew 7 and see what Jesus has to say. Do not judge so that you won't be judged. For you'll be judged by the same standard with which you judge others, and you'll be measured by the same measure that you use. Now, this is an oft-quoted verse. I mean, we hear this all the time. Don't judge. Judge not. Usually to try to cover up something that they're doing, that you don't like, or they know you don't like, and you've maybe stated that before, and hey, judge not lest you be judged. And they really go KJV on us in that moment. Have you noticed? And it just has a certain spice to it. Judge not lest you be judged. I mean, we love it in that moment. It's great. Especially if we want them to condone whatever it is I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing to start with. I know it, they know it, everybody knows it. Don't judge me. That's the new way to say it. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. Well, there's several reasons and several moments where my judging you is an appropriate and I would say a God-given opportunity to do so. One is, I'm your boss, I get to do that. Or I'm your parent and I get to do that. Or I'm your guardian and I get to do that. Or I'm your teacher and I get to do that in those moments. I mean, we have all kinds of places where judging is an appropriate and expected moment. But in the interpersonal relationships, it gets a little dicey. Because we're not as happy about those things. We don't like that. When Jesus is saying to judge not, or you're going to be judged in the same way that you are judging, in the same way that you give it out, you're going to receive it kind of idea. He's speaking specifically, I think, here about the way that people are going about it. You know, there's many different ways that you can go about judging somebody. First way that you can go about judging somebody is a superficial kind of judging. It's based on appearances. We're good at that. You know, what were we always told as a kid? Don't judge a book by its cover. And yet we do it 1,000 times a day. Except we do it with people. If it were only books. But it's not. It's people, and that's where it hurts. When we judge somebody based upon an appearance, or if we judge somebody based upon their worst moment ever, I mean, let's not define one another by our worst moments. It's difficult. But in superficial judging, this is where we are. We judge, we make those quick assumption kind of things. And we all know the rule of thumb, you can't ever make a second first impression. Right? Unless we allow that to happen. How many of us wish we could take back our first impression in some moments? How many, we would love, that's that judgment-free zone, right? We would love, hey, can I have a do-over on that? Ever walked out of an interview and go, man, I wish I could do that over. Walk out of a test, man, I'd like to have that over. Get home from an outing and go, whew, man, can we just rewind that a little? Can I just put back in my mouth the things that came out of it? I've always heard you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Once it comes out, it's there. It's there for everybody to see, and all it's going to do is make a mess. Ever leave the cap off your toothpaste and accidentally put your elbow on it? It's just... You try to clean it up, and it's just like it expands. You're wiping it up, and it's like, how did it get over there? Okay, I got to go do this. This is what superficial judging does. It's all about the appearance. It's this first impression. And we cut down people, and we throw people out, and we dismiss them without ever giving them a chance. I'm thankful that God didn't do that with me. That in Jesus, I got another chance. In Jesus, I get one more time. Why can't we do that with each other? There's also a hypocritical kind of judging. And this kind of judgment is, he'll give an illustration about it. It's all about finding the things wrong with somebody else, but not yourself. What some people will say, it's really interesting that what happens oftentimes is this: the things that you're very judgy about are the things you're doing that nobody may know about. You got all kinds of rigid rules about those kinds of things. Why? Because you're not doing it, so you want to hold other people accountable for it. Jesus used the illustration that, why do you look for the piece of dust in somebody else's eye when you have a piece of lumber coming out of your own? Why do you do that? How do you do that exactly? And it's very humorous if you start to think about that happening. Somebody trying to come up and inspect something inside your eye while they're beating you upside the head with what's coming out of their own. I mean, it's a humorous way to say it, but it gets the point across, doesn't it? That we need to be careful in how we are presenting that and how we're being critical about those kinds of things. There is a gracious way to go about it, and there's even appropriate ways to go about it. We have to be real careful. We can also harshly judge people. We can harshly judge people. We can just go overboard. We can make it personal. We're frustrated over this, but we tack on all of these other things as well while we're at it. Well, if I'm already knee-deep in it, let's just go. But then it gets harsh, and then it gets cruel, and then it gets hateful, and then you lose sight of why you even started having the conversation. Because you started in order to try to correct this behavior or to deal with this situation or this moment, but now you've gone off script and you're on this tangent over here, and now you can't even see where you started or where you are. It's just gotten harsh. And maybe you're angry in your own life. Maybe you're frustrated in your own life. But you know what? Don't take that out on everybody else. It's not appropriate to do. If you're mad, take it up with God. If you're mad with somebody about a particular situation, then go to them, Matthew 18, go to them and talk to them about that situation. And if you've got 3 other things you want to talk about, set a time and a place to talk about those. But don't just dredge all of it up and in shock and awe just drop bombs on people all the time. And you wonder why you can't find friends. Because we're too harsh. We're too cruel. And we can judge that way. Pharisees did that a lot in Jesus' day. They also did a lot of other things. They're also hypocritical, and they're also self-righteous, which is our next one. You be self-righteous. And just really try to make this difference between me and somebody else, and just set yourself up as just this wonderful, perfect individual. Just how perfect I am and how poor and awful you are. Well, how does that play out in real life? Well, it can come in a lot of different forms. You're awful brave to wear that today. Well, I wouldn't be caught dead in that, but nice of you to try. I mean, these are just some, what are you doing? That's not how I would do it. Why are you doing it that way? Now, to be fair, I find myself in that moment sometimes, especially when it comes to the dishwasher at my house. Why did you load it that way? I don't know. Have I not, you passed your qualifications, have I not shown you how to load the dishwasher? Well, Dad, there's other ways to load the dishwasher, Not in this house. There's one way to load the dishwasher in this house. The plates go this way, not this way. But we can get that way, can't we? We judge in that way. Have we ever opened our mind to think there's another way? I am completely open-minded to having the plates go the way the first time you show me it comes out clean. When it comes out clean, we'll talk. Otherwise, do it this way. Why do you let your car get down to 4 miles left before you go to the gas station? And then graciously say, you can borrow my car, Dad. Where am I going to go? Anybody else feel me on that one? Come on now. Man. But then there's the other kind of judgment, and it's just untrue. It's just lying, sharing untruths. And usually it starts off with, I heard that. That's how that one oftentimes starts. Well, I heard. Well, did you know? No, I'm ignorant. I don't know. Don't want to know. Well, I heard. Okay, from them or somebody else? Because if you heard it from somebody else, that's untrue judging. Because Matthew 18 will tell us, go to the person. If you got a problem, and if you're starting out conversations in small groups of people and say, well, I heard that, ... it's likely you haven't gone to the person to understand what the truth is. You've just made a judgment and spreading the lies. Jesus is saying, guys, you can't do that stuff. Unless, of course, that's how you want to receive it. And I can guarantee you, any of those 5, none of us want to receive. So Matthew 7:1 is telling us, if you don't want to receive it that way, stop giving it that way. Now, there's right times and places to judge and evaluate and hold people accountable. And we don't do that well in the Baptist church anymore. But there are times and places, there's right moments to do that. And we should do that. But not in those ways. So, Jesus goes on, saying you'll be judged by the same standard that you judge, and be measured by the same measure. Why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye, but don't notice the beam of wood in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the splinter out of your eye, and look, there's a beam of wood in your own eye? Hypocrite! First, take the beam of wood out of your own eye. Then you'll see clearly to take the splinter out of your brother's eye. Then he has this complicated, weird statement. I ought to do a whole series on the weird statements of Jesus. This one would be one of them. Because it's hard to understand, isn't it? We don't get it, right? I mean, if you do some study, you can figure it out. But if you just hear it, don't give what's holy to dogs. Okay. Or toss your pearls before pigs. Wasn't thinking about that. Or they'll trample them under their feet, turn and tear you to pieces. What's he saying? We're going to get there in just a second. But Jesus has all kinds of things that he's saying here. How should we go about judging then? Outside of the Matthew 18 situation that we understand about going to the person and dealing with the person, that has more to do with somebody who's offended you, who is sinning against you, that you need to go deal with. But in just these everyday kinds of ways that we can be self-righteous and judge other people in harsh and cruel and untrue ways, what are we supposed to do? And Jesus gives us a few thoughts. First of all, we have to think critically about it, and that's where we've been for the first few minutes. We don't think critically enough. We speak critically before we'll think critically. Let me repeat that. It's far easier to speak critically than it is to think critically. And Jesus is calling us to think critically about these things. He says, take a minute, think about it. The way that you're judging is how they're going to do you, and you're going to be measured by the same measure you use. You need to think critically about, how do I want to proceed in this moment? How should I go in this way? Now, before you go off when you're at work, if you're in a larger situation, there's a whole department to help you know how to handle this. It's called HR. And we make fun of HR. We don't always like HR. And we think they've got too many rules for us. But there's rules for a reason. And those rules are helped to guide these interpersonal kinds of moments on the job, to not only make sure that we're legally okay, but that we are personally okay. They create whole degrees out of this stuff. Think critically. How should I go about this moment? I have, it's a weird thing, but it's something that I've done for most of my life. Now, used to I stand in front of the mirror and do it. Now I just walk around the house doing it, and everybody thinks I'm crazy. But I talk to myself. Now, I'm usually rehearsing some scenario that I know is about to happen. I'm about to go into this thing. I'm about to go into this moment, this meeting, this situation, this scenario, this complicated moment. I'm going to walk into that, and either I'm going to do it that day or I know what's coming. And I start playing through, what are all the options? How could this thing go sideways? See, if we don't take time to think about how what I say could go sideways on me, then that's what's going to get us in trouble. We don't think about that. We're not thinking critically. How could this go wrong? How could this go wrong for them? How could this go wrong for me? How could this go wrong for other people that are in that moment or overhearing that situation? How could it go wrong? We've got to think clearly about that. Remember, it's easier to speak critical than to think critical. So we got to be careful. It's why Jesus is saying this through these times. Look, consider how you're about to engage this person, because you may have prejudged them. You know another way to say prejudge them? Prejudice. It's prejudging. Well, I'm not prejudiced. Hang on. I think we all are about something and we don't always realize it. We prejudge people all the time. Some of it is superficial. Some of it isn't. So we have to be careful. Think critically about what it is that you're doing. And then verse 3, act wisely. Why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye but don't notice the beam of wood in your own eye? Act wisely. Act wisely. before you go up to handle something small in their life, I'm not saying we're perfect. We're not going to be perfect. But if you've got something glaring over here that everybody knows about, maybe you're not the best person to go speak into this moment. Either because you're not the person that needs to speak into it, or you need to get yourself right before God before going and speaking into it. We have to act wisely. Act with wisdom. I love the youth have been doing this ever since camp. Whatever the date of that day is, they read the Proverbs. And then they've been sitting out on remind, hey, what did you think about this and what did you think about that? Now, I don't see all the responses, so I just hope you guys are responding to him on remind through that. I don't see all those. But it's awesome to think. Why? Because there's so much wisdom being dropped on us out of the Proverbs. Statement after statement after statement, pregnant with meaning and wisdom that we can find wonderful opportunities to live out. Just good things to know. Solid stuff we need to know. I would challenge the larger body. Go home, read Proverbs 7. Put it on the church's Facebook page. Hey, I read Proverbs 7. This is what stood out to me. Oh man, this verse right here, God really said something to me about that. Or hey, have you ever noticed, I didn't know this verse was in there. That's awesome. Act wisely, which means you have to get some wisdom if you want it to come out of you. Garbage in, garbage out. Wisdom in, wisdom out. It's like breathing. To act wisely. Take care of your business. Speak carefully. How can you say to your brother, let me take the splinter out, and there's a beam of wood in your own eye? Be careful what and when and how you say things. And process it. First, take the beam of wood out of your own eye so you can see clearly to take the splinter out of your brother's eye. See, he's not saying we shouldn't ever judge or help, or equip, or help somebody in a transformative process, discipleship. It's not saying we can't do that. He's just saying, look, take the beam of wood out of your own eye, process that before going and helping your brother. Because has anybody ever had a splinter in your eye? I mean, I get a splinter in my finger and I'm like annoyed. In your eye? Can you imagine how that feels? Anybody have that? Anybody done that? You know, and it's not a splinter, but I think it was 100 times worse. I got done chopping up hot green chilies the other day and forgot, and I forgot that I had done that and decided it was time for me to take my contacts out. Yeah, baby. Lit my world up. I didn't take, if somebody had just told me, hey, Aaron, of course I was by myself. Aaron, see, I wasn't talking to myself. Aaron, you just cut those, you might not want to do that. See, sometimes that splinter or that jalapeno juice in your eye in life moment, it's harming you. And you need somebody to help wash that out. But you don't want somebody who's also been cutting jalapenos to come mess with your eye. There's a spiritual truth there. Did you catch it? That's ultimately what Jesus is saying. Look, take care of your own stuff before trying to help somebody else. It's not about being perfect, but get the log out. You probably have some splinters left, but get the log out, the large thing, get it done. Wash your hands thoroughly before going to help somebody else get junk out of their eye. Otherwise, you just keep contaminating it, and then everybody's mad. Process it properly. And then love rightly. Love rightly. You know, he's saying, don't give what's fleeted dogs or toss pearls before swine or pigs. And the reason is because there are times and places, and you run into people and they're not going to listen to anything you have to say. Preachers run into this all the time. You're not going to hear a thing they have to say. Sometimes that's going to happen to us, and we're not going to understand that. And so what he's ultimately saying is, just stop. At some point, you just got to let it go. And you've got to let that just go and say, look, that's just not going to be a thing that we need to deal with. And we need to understand how we need to process and move forward with that. And it begins with this sense of loving rightly. Understanding that I want to love you, but at the same time, if you aren't going to hear anything that I have to say, okay, the ringtone's off, pay attention. It's done. Pay attention. I'm almost done. Some might say I'm already done. We got to love rightly. Engage those that are going to hear and listen. And sometimes you're just going to have to let some things go because they're not going to pay attention, and it's just going to make you mad the more you try to help. They don't want your help. So love them, so they learn to want your help because you've loved them. Well, I've tried to tell them how bad they are and they're going to hell and they need Jesus. They just won't do anything. Well, how about you stop beating them up and love them for a little while? Build a relationship, have a rapport, have a moment where you can invest in their life and then be able to give them the greatest opportunity as you share Jesus with them based out of a relationship you've already established with them. The same is true in the church body. When we go and see somebody else across the room we've really got no relationship with, but by golly, I got to go tell them this. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have to. I would suggest go to the Lord God first. Second, if you don't have a relationship with them, keep your mouth shut. If you really are grieved over what's going on, find somebody who does have a relationship with them and begin to prayerfully discern what needs to happen. Or seek God's power for you to let it go long enough for you to love them, invest in them, build a relationship with them, and care for them, and build a rapport with them in order so that you can then walk together in unity toward the cross of Christ and allow all the things to fall away. What will you do? Because it doesn't matter what I say. As much as it matters, what are you going to do with what's been said?